Hi guys, and welcome to a Hector lecture guide to the Unending Coil of Bahamut phase Bahamut. This is the third phase of this fight. This is the third guide in a series of 5 videos that are going to break down the entirety of this ultimate fight. If you haven't watched my first 2 and you still need help with either the first phase Twintanya or the second phase Nail, go give those guides a watch. The links are in the description. As you start this phase, before you can get to it, you need to survive the transition from Nail phase. To do this, the whole party needs to stack in a Neuralink, and you need a minimum of Tank LB2, with Tank LB3 making the whole thing quite easier. If you're having trouble doing this consistently, go back to Twin Phase. When you're doing Twin Phase, those Fireball stack markers can actually be taken with as few as 5 players with the right mitigation. If you manage to get it so that everybody gets brought down to critical HP, they almost die, but they don't die. When these stacks go off, you're going to generate a huge amount of limit break. Assuming you've worked out how to make sure that you have at least LB2. For Tank LB2, pop it before you see any mechanics happen. For Tank LB3, you need to wait for the first hit. The stage will transition, a fireball will drop down and knock back you towards the edge of the arena. This comes with heavy damage, and you get 3 more pulsing raid wides. Finally, one last hit as the fireball explodes. That last hit is the one that requires you to have a Tank LB. And if you're only using LB2, you're going to want some extra mitigation on top of that. Healers, this is a tight heal check. If you have a White Mage, Cure 3 is your friend. As the phase begins, Bahamut will initially be aggroed to whoever had aggro on Nail at the end of that phase. Sort out your aggro, and then have whichever player's main tanking position away from the rest of the party. They'll be targeted with Flare Breath. This is a conal tank buster. It hits quite heavy, just barely survivable with no mitigation. Next up, you get Flatten. This is a really heavy hitting physical tank buster. For this tank buster, there is no swap required, but you will need 1, preferably 2 mitigations from the tank to be able to survive it. Then we get the first of 6 major mechanics. You'll see both Twin and Nail show up, and get ready for Quickmarch Trio. This whole phase is really 6 major mechanics with some light downtime in between where you're fighting, dealing with tank busters, and you're dealing with raid wides. Unfortunately, despite the fact that DPS check has gotten much easier as time has gone on, there is no way to really skip any of these mechanics. You have to be able to survive all 6 with your party, otherwise you will not be able to see the 4th phase of the fight. Let's go over the first one, Quickmarch Trio. Before I break this down, here are most of the mechanics you're going to see throughout Bahamut phase. Mega Flare is a combination of 3 different mechanics. You get puddles that appear underneath players. You can just move out of these the same as you did the light puddles during Nail phase. You get small AoEs that targets random players. And you get these symbols. If you see this around your player, this is a stack marker. Those players need to stack together to share the damage that's about to come out. If you have one of these and you're by yourself, then you're likely to die. And if you don't have enough players in it, you're likely to kill those players as well. So just group up, soak it together. You're also going to get Earth Shakers. When a player gets this marker over their head, they're about to be targeted with a cone. It's a very wide cone, and a puddle will appear under them where they were when they were hit. Most players can survive 1 quite comfortably, but getting hit by 2 Earth Shakers is a death sentence for anyone other than a tank. Finally, there's Tempest Wing. Certain players will be targeted with tethers, and any player who runs through the tether can pick it up. If you've ever done the fight P3S, you'll know how these work because they're exactly the same as the tank buster tethers from that fight. These will always be dealt with by tanks who pick up the tether by running through it, and then at the end of the mechanic, the tether will explode in a circle around them. Any player who is too near will get knocked back into the death wall and will die. Finally, one more thing to worry about. You're going to get a lot of twisters during this phase, so be ready to deal with those. Learn the timing the same as you've done for Twin Phase. So let's get back to Quickmarch Trio. For the first one, the 3 bosses will all appear together on a random direction around the arena. Find them and get ready to dodge them because they're about to all dive straight through the middle of the arena. We want to spread out to the sides, but we need to make sure we're spread from each other as there's about to be both twisters and those Mega Flare spread AoEs. We do this in this spread pattern here, with the tanks nearest to the bosses, then healers, then melee, then ranged, with 1 light party going left and 1 light party going right. We'll use the same spread pattern a lot throughout the phase. As soon as the bosses dive, you can move towards where they dove to dodge the twisters. We're now going to get Mega Flare puddles, Mega Flare stack markers on 3 of the DPS, and don't stack up too quickly because 4 players are targeted with those Mega Flare spread AoEs. We're going to dodge out of those puddles, but we're going to do it in a specific manner. As Bahamut appears and those explode, you'll see that the DPS who did not get a stack marker has gone towards where the bosses first appeared. The DPSs that did have a stack marker have all gone opposite where the bosses appeared, towards where they dove to. And the tanks and healers have respectively gone left and right, more or less due east and west from that relative north of where the bosses were. We're going to get an Earthshaker marker on each healer and the DPS who did not get targeted with a stack Mega Flare. Soak the Mega Flares. Have the 3 players spread out with the healers east-west and the DPS sort of where the bosses first appeared. And the tanks can now use this time to pick up those tethers. This is quite tight timing-wise. Make sure you don't start grabbing your tether too early and get caught by the stack AoE as that goes off. Once the tanks have their tethers, they should position in front of each of the healers to make sure they only take 1 Earthshaker. As the puddles appear, those players who were just targeted with Earthshakers need to get away from the tanks, but while making sure they're not too close because the tank buster Tempest Wings are now going to go off. As soon as this finishes, have your main tank away from the rest of the party because they get another Flare Breath. You've got another Flatten Tank Buster to heal and mitigate through, and then we get our second major mechanic, Blackfire Trio. The bosses will appear, and as they jump away, make sure your entire party is stacked due middle of the arena. The bosses are going to reappear. Their position is random, but they'll always be in the same order. By that I mean, if you find Bahamut, if you look clockwise, you'll find Nail. If you look counterclockwise, you'll find Twin. We need to be positioned all middle because this dive bomb marker is going to appear. Bahamut is now going to start to dive where this player was when the marker appeared, meaning we need to not be middle as Bahamut's about to dive through middle. Instead, what we need to do is find Nail, and the whole party is going to start slowly moving towards Nail. During this, Twin's going to start putting liquid hell puddles underneath the party. We're going to bait these together away. And after the 4th puddle, Nail's going to hit us with a Thermionic Beam stack, so the whole group needs to be together. Bahamut will dive and we'll dodge that, and now the tanks and healers should peel off one way and the DPS should peel off another way. We've had our tanks and healers go left and the DPS right facing Nail. You're going to get 4 towers appear and 4 Mega Flare stack markers. The players with the stack markers will always be a tank, a healer, and 2 DPS. They should go group up behind where we initially baited the first liquid hell. Everyone else is going to position just outside of one of the towers. For tank and healer, you can agree who takes the near, who takes the far, as that'll always be consistent. But for DPS, you just need to adjust or call it out on voice chat. Before we can just soak this, Nail's going to target 4 random players with Hypernova puddles, those same puddles that give the dot tick that we saw during her phase. The order is puddle, the stack marker goes off, the 2nd puddle, go into the towers, 3rd puddle, 4th puddle. Don't go into the tower too early, as you might cover up the whole tower with one of those Hypernova puddles, and then you won't be able to soak it without dying. So, looking at it at pace, puddle, the stack goes off, puddle, soak the towers, puddle, and 1 more puddle. Be aware if you're the stack, there's a decent chance that first puddle is appearing underneath you. Take the stack, then get out of the puddle. Just to show you how you can save this, if one of your players has died, say M1 stayed a little bit too long in one of those liquid hells and is not there to soak their tower, all that needs to happen is you need to make sure you leave the tower nearest to the stack group free. That way, the puddle will appear, the stack goes off, the puddle happens, and now R1's going to cover. It's perfectly fine to take both the stack and the tower. You just need to make sure that the tower near to the stack marker is free because they won't be able to get to any other tower in time. If this all finishes, group up together for some heals as you've got a Giga Flare raid wide to heal through. Giga Flare hits hard enough that if you don't have any mitigation or shielding, it will kill players even at full health. Have the boss be positioned facing away from the party as main tank gets a triple Flare Breath. You need to watch your tank's health very carefully because if they die to the 1st or 2nd hit, that 2nd or 3rd Flare Breath is likely going through the group, killing everyone. Next up is Fellruin Trio. This is the third major mechanic of Bahamut phase. As the bosses jump away, the whole group should be more or less middle. You don't need to be due middle this time. If you use the waymarks that I've shown you throughout these guides, then the bosses will reappear one on each Neuralink. You want to find Nail and do a light spread around Nail. We're in the same spread pattern we've used for Quickmarch Trio, but with the tanks closest to Bahamut, and then healer's melee range moving away from Bahamut. If you don't put like this light spread position because you find it too tight for the mechanics you're about to do, you can have one healer stack on Nail and the rest spread out to give you a little bit more room. You're now about to get one of two triple Nail quotes. Just like in Nail phase, there's 3 hidden phrases here. Simplifying it down, the possible mechanic combinations are either in, spread, spread, or spread, in, spread, with that final spread always being a meteor stream where 4 random players get some damage. To make this more complicated, we get 2 other things during it. You get the Tempest Wing Tethers, and you get Twintanya casting Etheric Profusion. This causes insanely high damage that will kill any player who is not in a Neuralink as the cast happens. The order works like this. Do the first part of the quote, have your tanks try to grab the tethers. Do the second part, get in a Neuralink, do the third part of the quote. Because the tethers explode at about the same time as Etheric Profusion, the tanks are going to each need to be in their own Neuralink, and the rest of the party shares the last Neuralink underneath Nail. Let's look at what this looks like for each possible quote. For in spread spread, first position the whole party quite close to Nail, ready to dodge the donut. Tanks try to pick up the tethers as we deal with the spread, and they can start to immediately run towards their Neuralink. As soon as the spread hits, everyone needs to be in a Neuralink. The tanks are going to have their Tempest Wings explode as the Etheric Profusion makes everything hard to see, and as soon as that happens, the group should spread. For healers and DPS, you want to spread in the same direction that you just came from for the previous spread to make it easy and not have 2 people spread in the same direction. Let's look at the other quote. If you get spread in, use a very light spread. If you spread too far here, it's going to make the rest of the mechanics impossible. As soon as the spread happens, tanks need to dodge towards Nail for the in with the rest of the group, but while trying to pick up the tethers. They're also going to position as close as possible towards the Neuralinks they're going to run to, and if they can, pop sprint. Now they're going to run over towards their individual Neuralinks, and just like before, the Tempest Wing and the Etheric Profusion goes off, and now everybody spreads. That's it for Fellruin Trio. Have everybody group up and heal for a Giga Flare. Make sure that your main tank is away from the party, because almost immediately after this finishes casting, they're going to get hit with a Flare Breath. Now there's a Flatten, and finally one last Flare Breath. You might want to consider swapping tanks at some point in time during this to minimize how much the one tank needs to use their cooldowns, though if you have a Dark Knight, this is perfectly doable just with them throwing Blackest Night onto the main tank. Heavensfall Trio is the 4th major mechanic in Bahamut phase. As the bosses jump away, once again the whole party needs to stack due middle, as we're getting some dive bombs. The 3 bosses will appear on a random direction, in a random order, but always on the same side as each other. You need to find Twin and Bahamut. These are the only 2 bosses that are about to dive. You can completely ignore Nail. Nail will not be diving. If you get Twin and Bahamut next to each other, like we see here, wait for the waymarks, the dive bomb markers to appear, and then spread exactly the same as you did during Quickmarch Trio. As the dives happen, move because twisters appear. That pattern's almost identical to Quickmarch. Things are a little bit more difficult if Nail is in the middle. In this case, as Twin and Bahamut are doing the dive, they're going to form more of an X pattern, and it's simpler to dodge while spreading if the tanks run directly towards Nail and the range run directly opposite. It looks like this. Thus, the tanks and the ranged are in the middle of the 2 X pattern from the dive bombs. Everybody still moves to deal with the twisters. Now comes the hard part. You're going to get 8 towers and 4 puddles. Just dodge the puddles as normal, but the towers are the problem. Just before they go off, we get a Heavensfall knockback, and we need to get 1 player into each tower. But the arrangement of the towers is almost entirely random. They appear around the edge of the arena, but where they show up is so random that you need to have a sensible way to assign 1 tower per person. Here's the suggested way. Have one of your light parties look at Nail. If there's a tower on Nail, that counts for them. And then rotate clockwise to find their towers. We're going in the same order as our spread, tank, healer, melee, ranged, taking the first, second, third, and fourth tower respective from Nail. Again, if there is a tower on Nail, there isn't always, that tower counts for this group. The other group looks at Nail, doesn't count the one on Nail if there's one, and goes counterclockwise. Again, tank, healer, melee, ranged, taking the first, second, third, and fourth towers respectively. Position about the same distance as the Neuralinks so that you don't die to the initial Heavensfall damage, and you don't get knocked back so far that you hit the wall of death. There's time to adjust after the knockback, so you can always move into your tower afterwards. There's about a second. You just need to make sure that you're not having two players run to the same tower. Afterwards, two Thunder AoEs appear. I recommend move 90 degrees away from these, as they're going to start to spin either clockwise or counterclockwise as you get some Hypernova puddles. Just spin, watching out for any puddles so you don't run into them. If you sort of spiral into middle, you'll naturally dodge them. And at the very end, once every explosion's gone off, there's a fireball stack to deal with together. Take that stack as you prepare for a Gigaflare raid-wide. I'll show you just one other way to potentially dodge those Thunder AoEs as you get knocked back and adjust into your towers. Look at off-tank. They're going to try a different dodge pattern. Instead of spinning around, if you find that too much movement and too difficult, there is a gap between the first and second Thunder explosion. You can wait for the first one to explode, and then just dodge into where it was, and the mechanic is done. You still need to watch out for puddles if lots of your party are doing this. Regardless, you're going to stack up for the fireball. Now, to show you one other thing, suppose some players die during either the knockback or the towers or the puddles or to the electric explosions. If you don't have enough players to survive the stack, you might want to have your stack player move away from the party to take it by themselves. They will die, but there's plenty of time here to res players to get them ready for the next major mechanic. However you do with it, heal through the Gigaflare raid-wide, and have your tank away from the party as they have another triple Flare Breath. Lots of healing and mitigation required. Tenstrike Trio is the 5th major mechanic in the Bahamut phase. As the bosses jump away, your group's going to start to roughly spread out, and you'd want to spread them out in the same spread pattern as Quickmarch Trio, with D as true north. As the bosses jump away, you want to go out, not all the way to the edge, but somewhat out. And as Twin lands middle, 3 players are targeted with the marker that says you're about to get targeted with a hatch. This is completely random who gets targeted. So you just need to look around and think what's the most sensible way for these 3 players to get into a Neuralink each. If you've got voice chat, this is a great time to use callouts to say who's going to 1, who's going to 2, who's going to 3. Everyone else is spread out around the outside because while we're dealing with these 3 hatches, everybody's going to get targeted one at a time by little mini nail spread AoEs. The first hatches will come. Each one explodes, 1 per player. And now things get tricky because another set of hatches are going to spawn to deal with these. The 3 players who were targeted, they're the same players those hatches are going to chase. They're going to move directly backwards from middle. 3 other players are going to cover the Neuralink for them. And make sure that you move diagonally. If you look at M1 and R2 here as this happens, they're going to move in such a way that they're still spread the whole time because otherwise M1's spread might have killed R2. The reason we do this is because these hatches are targeting the same players as the first set. So H1, off-tank, and M1 are being targeted, but MT, H2, and R2 need to be the ones to intercept them in the Neuralink. The same player cannot take 2 hatches without dying, and if these aren't intercepted in a Neuralink, the whole party wipes. As long as your players are in position and everyone's still spread, you've dealt with the first half of this. Next up, very simple to explain, very hard to do. You get 4 Earthshakers. Those 4 players need to spread out, and everyone else needs to hide at the 3-way mark. It is totally random who gets these, and so you just need to look around and find the simplest way to get your 4 players into the 4 corners of the arena. I recommend taking the first set out so that the puddles are away from middle to make the second set easier. Because that's right, there's a second set of Earthshakers targeting the 4 players currently hiding at 3. The good news is you can use this time to communicate where you're going. If you look carefully, those 4 players are stood on the 4 corners of the 3-way mark. They're currently communicating where they're going to go. By this I mean R1 is currently saying, I'm about to go where H1 is by standing on the top left of the 3-way mark. This is just an easy way to keep voice chat clear so that the other 4 players can call where they're going as they panic to get to the 4 corners for the first set of Earthshakers. Now, all that happens is once the second set appears, you swap. If the first set was baited correctly so that no one died, you can just have your 4 players here stand in front of the first puddles, and the second set will also be baited perfectly. If everyone's good to go, stack middle, as you've got a Gigaflare to heal with. All that's left is a Flatten, and 1 more Flare Breath. The boss will start to cast Grand Octet, the final major mechanic of Bahamut phase. As those bosses appear, really important, look at the health bar. You need to get the boss below 60%. With a clean run, the boss could be as low as 50% here. There's not much of a DPS check, but on a lot of deaths, it's very possible that the boss could still be above 60%. If they are, don't worry too much. If you're still practicing and learning the fight, you can do the entirety of the 4th phase with no issue. But if the boss is not below 60%, the fight is impossible to finish because in the final phase of the fight, the boss will be unkillable and will wipe the party easily. So 60%, that's the goal. If you get the boss below 60 in advance, save your resources for the next phase as you'll want them, as the DPS check is a little bit tougher. Halfway through the Grand Octet cast, those 5 dragons from Nail phase will appear in random cardinals and intercardinals. The cast will finish, and the whole party should stack due middle, and the 3 bosses will appear in the final 3 positions. Now that we've got all 8 bosses for our Octet, here's how we deal with it. First, find Bahamut. Second, is Bahamut on a cardinal or an intercardinal? This determines the direction we're going to dodge. Because Bahamut is currently on an intercardinal, we're going to be doing a clockwise dodge. Third, the first movement is to go directly opposite Bahamut. So first, in this case, we would run towards Twin, and once we got to Twin, we would start to move in a clockwise fashion. Just to show you one twist to this, the bosses appear, you find Bahamut, you find which way you're going, you go, oh, he's on an intercardinal, I need to go clockwise, and you get ready to run opposite, and you see Nail. That's a problem. The first dive bomb is Nail. If you run directly at Nail, Nail's going to dive through you and kill the entire party. If you see Nail, start your rotation 1 spot earlier, so instead go to the first spot clockwise in this case, or if you were doing a counterclockwise, go the first spot counterclockwise. However, it ends up happening. You don't move until you see your first 2 dive bomb markers. They appear simultaneously. The yellowy one signifies Nail is going to dive where you are when this appears, so Nail's going to dive through the middle. And the second is the first of several ones for the 5 dragons, who are each going to be baited by 1 dive bomb marker. Once these appear, you can run towards the edge, opposite Bahamut, and wait for Nail to dive through the middle. This is the timing for when you want to start your movement. So we've worked out that we're going clockwise, so we're going to start going clockwise, and the dragons are going to keep diving behind us. As you're doing this, make sure you're spread out enough that you can see if you're the one getting the dive bomb marker. We're all together, so the position doesn't matter, but it's very crucial that you know, did you get a marker or not? As at the end, somebody's going to have to know that they were the one who didn't get a marker. Keep moving around. You might want to be jumping to make it easier to see if you're targeted with a dive bomb marker. And continue to spin. As you get past Bahamut, you might want to pop sprint to make it easier to get away from the dragons that are diving behind you. If you had Nail opposite, so you started your position 1 spot clockwise, you don't need to pop sprint. You're good to go. The timing is perfectly fine, just moving around. As you're moving around in a circle, be ready for 1 person to get a red marker. As soon as you see that, the whole group needs to hightail it to middle to avoid Bahamut's dive, which goes where that marker was when it appeared. Now, did you remember who didn't get a marker? The 1 player who does not have a marker yet, they're going to need to go bait Twin. Because this is baited where they are at the start, they need to immediately go to the left of Twin, facing Twin. In this case, it was H2. Now everyone just needs to deal with 4 towers and 4 players targeted with Mega Flare stack markers. Have the party with the stack markers go to the right of Twin, and have the other players each take a tower. Whoever's baiting Twin they're also either going to have a stack marker or be responsible for a tower, so look at them. If they're responsible for a tower, leave the tower nearest to them empty so they have time to get to it. Now the dive bomb marker is going to appear, and as soon as it does, that player can move towards either the stack group or towards their tower. The stack goes off, twin baits, and move for a twister. If you're in a tower, make sure you move while staying in a tower. You can do little spins around your tower and just stop before you run into your twister. There's one other way to deal with this. If you haven't used Tank LB3 to cheese any prior mechanics, this is the perfect time for it. This mechanic is significantly easier with a Tank LB3, as you can completely ignore the stack markers. Just have your player who needs to bait twin go bait twin, and make sure that you've still got one player per tower. Does not matter if it's a player with a stack marker or not, because Tank LB3 pop now is going to completely ignore that. I'd recommend, because that tank is going to be locked in animation, having them not responsible for a tower. Now, as soon as H2 gets it, they move away. The group still dodges the twisters while staying in the towers if they're responsible for a tower. And you're good to go. It's not required, but it is helpful. It makes that mechanic a little bit easier. If you've survived, if nobody's just eaten a twister and killed half the party, that's it. You are done with Bahamut phase, and regardless of whether or not you got it below the required DPS check, you get to see the 4th phase. Thanks for watching this guide. I hope you found it useful. If you've got any questions, tips, or suggestions, throw them in the comment section below. Take care, guys.